With holiday shopping wrapping up for the year, reports are showing that holiday sales grew this season. According to MasterCard, U.S. retail sales grew about 3% from November to Christmas Eve. But spending is down compared to last year's 7.5%. Shoppers this season were faced with higher interest rates and inflation, as well as less appealing discounts. Analysts say discounts weren't as deep as last year when stores were stuck with extra stock from the pandemic. MasterCard did see an increase in sales for clothes and restaurants and a drop in electronic sales. And Apple scored a victory on Wednesday as a U.S. appeals court paused the government commission's import ban on some of its popular Apple smartwatches. And this is following a patent dispute with the medical technology firm. The tech giant had filed an emergency request for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit to halt the order after appealing the U.S. International Trade Commission's decision that it had infringed on the patents. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration declined to veto the ban on December 26, allowing it to take effect, and Apple asked for a pause of that ban a day later. And Amazon Prime customers can mark January 29th on their calendar. That's when they'll begin to see ads when watching their favorite shows and movies. The company initially announced the plans to bring commercials to Prime Video earlier this fall. Amazon said at the time that the ads will allow them to, quote, continue investing in compelling content and keep increasing that investment over a long period of time. Customers do have the option of paying an additional $2.99 per month if they want to continue to watch Prime Video without seeing the commercials. Other streaming platforms such as Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus have already introduced a tiered subscription model. Big oil companies fueled 2023 with massive mergers instead of burning cash on renewable energy projects. Last year, the oil and gas industry went on a whopping $250 billion buying spree. This includes acquisitions made by ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Occidental Petroleum. With strong share prices, most of the deals were actually stock swaps and not big cash buys. Oil companies found this more valuable since rising interest rates made funding renewable energy projects much more costly. And the mergers are also a response to the U.S. moving away from fossil fuels and toward electric cars as producers try to reduce their production costs. If improving your credit is on your New Year's resolution, you're not alone. A majority of Americans told the NerdWallet they want better credit in 2024. To protect your credit, stay on top of payments. And if you did overdo it on holiday gifts, carrying debt and making minimum payments will keep your payment history intact and shield your score. But if your credit card account becomes delinquent, pay the bill as soon as possible to prevent more damage from being done. And as for student loans, missed payments won't be considered delinquent until next September, but interest will keep adding to the balance. If you want to turn to more credit, experts suggest only borrowing more if necessary and to compare annual fee and interest rates when you do. A lot of California pizza delivery drivers may be looking for a new job in the delivery industry or new lines of work, in fact. Many California Pizza Huts are getting rid of drivers altogether, and this is due to a raise in minimum wage. NTD Sean Marshall has more.
A minimum wage hike to $20 an hour is too much for some California Pizza Hut franchises to pay delivery drivers, according to federal employment notices reviewed by Business Insider. In April 2024, multiple Pizza Hut chains are bracing for the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. The act requires employers to give notice of plant closures or mass layoffs, eliminating Pizza Hut in-house delivery driver services at hundreds of stores, resulting in more than 1,200 driver layoffs. A driver who wished to stay anonymous for fear of retaliation told Business Insider that he was offered $400 severance pay if he stuck around through his February 5th layoff date. The money they are giving us as severance pay is a slap on the face, he said. It comes to $3 a month for 9+ years of service. Another operator, Southern California Pizza Company, also announced layoffs of around 841 drivers across the state. Pizza Hut locations in Riverside, Los Angeles, Orange, Sacramento, San Bernardino, and Ventura counties will be affected. The job will be left up to delivery apps like Uber Eats, Grubhub, and DoorDash. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
According to a new report, somewhere around 900 million people in China are only earning around 2,000 yuan per month. And now if you convert that to US dollars, that's somewhere around $300 per month. Imagine that. Here's more. And now joining us is Antonio Graceffo, China economic analyst. So Antonio, around 900 million Chinese people living around less than $300 a month. Let me just get your first reaction to that from this report that we got today.
Yeah, no, that sounds absolutely right. I've been working in China for many years, been a China economist for many years, and I lived in China. And yeah, I mean, the income disparity in China is just absolutely staggering. The average income in China officially is, let's say it's about $12,000 a year, but the vast majority of people do not earn $12,000 a year. The vast majority of people earn about $300 a month. That's about $3,600 a year, which puts them on par with India. But even the $12,000 figure puts them on close to Mexico and just a little bit above Malaysia. So, China is the second richest country by GDP, but it is the 72nd richest country by per capita GDP. So they're only number 72 in terms of the wealth of the average citizen, but that is only an average. That average has no meaning at all because there's such a huge disparity between rich and poor in China.
I mean, is that enough for everyday life for the average Chinese citizen, less than $300 a month?
It's enough in the sense that they can pay rent and they can eat. So if you're, a poor Chinese person earning $300 a month, you have some kind of an absolutely unenviable apartment that you're living in, just some sort of terrible concrete block construction. You may not have indoor heating. Once you leave the cities, once you get outside of the cities, a lot of people don't have indoor heating. They have these little burner canister things that they'll put like next to their desk or something to keep them warm. There's no air conditioning, of course. And a lot of people don't have indoor plumbing. You have outhouses in a lot of places. I was in Zhengzhou, I was in a whole town in Zhengzhou that did not have a single flush toilet in the whole town. I was a guest of the richest man in the province or something, and he had this big luxurious house that did not have flush toilets. So I mean, yeah, it's people live very poor lives in most of China. And if you look at big cities like Beijing and Shanghai, the ratio of housing prices, so to purchase an apartment in Shanghai, the purchase price equal to 90 times the average salary. And to put that in perspective, in New York, which is one of the most unaffordable cities in America, in New York, it's 10.5 times annual salary. So the average apartment costs 10.5 times the average salary. In Shanghai, it's 90 times. So we are talking about people that are living in some sort of a world where they can afford that apartment, and in that same world, you got people with no plumbing and $300 a month of income.
Are most people in China living below the poverty line?
So that's a very good question. So the poverty line is set based on the income band of a country. So in other words, for the United States, because we have a particularly high GDP per capita, our GDP per capita is $70,000 a year. That puts us about number 7 or 8 in the world. So there's countries like Singapore, Dubai, where the average citizen is richer than the average American, but we're number 7 or 8. That's quite respectable. $70,000 a year. So our poverty line is about $12,000. So by our standards, the average person in China is living in poverty because they're earning, about $12,000. Now, the way poverty lines work, however, is based on the income band of the country. So given China's income band, most economists feel that the poverty line should be $5 to $10 a day, but China insists on trying to use the $2 figure. Well, with the $2 figure, they have a small percentage of the population living in poverty. But if we were to raise the poverty line to $10 a day, you'd have something like 60% of the population living in poverty.
So can you elaborate further why exactly China prefers this $2 figure?
Because Xi Jinping is very fond of saying, I raised 800,000 or 800 million people out of poverty. And, if we find out that 60% of them are still living in poverty, he can't say that anymore.
I see. Okay, so where does the state get its wealth from? Because it comes, in the U.S., it comes from taxes, right? So if people are making so little money, where does China get its wealth from?
So Yeah, you're absolutely correct. In the United States, the largest source of revenue to the government is the tax base. And the U.S. tax base is actually the largest source of revenue, I believe, in the world for any government in terms of taxes, because we have such a large population with such a high income and extremely high percentage of enforcement of the tax rules. So when you go to China now, you do have income tax. The income tax rate is lower. The incomes are lower. So the government has to make money on other businesses and other sources. So all governments collect money from tariffs, from fees, from fines, right? When you get a traffic ticket, that's revenue for the government. Local governments in China make their money from land sales. And remember that we have state-owned enterprises that also make money for the government. And, you know, if you're outside of China, you might know that there are state-owned enterprises that are doing mining in South Africa or whatever, in Africa or someplace. You have mining companies and dams and hydroelectric and oil that are state-owned enterprises. But when you're inside of China, what you find out is there's hairdressers and restaurants and things like that that are owned by the government. And then this is then providing revenue to the government.
So you mentioned income disparity earlier. What are the impacts on the economy when there's such an extreme income disparity?
Well, the income disparity, so the Gini coefficient is the measure of income disparity, and the higher the number, the more disparate the income is. And so in the U.S., I think we're around 4. And the World Bank, the IMF, they've always warned that if it goes well above 5, that you'll start to have social unrest, instability, because the poor people will start revolting because they're so poor. So we have countries in Africa, for example, where, the Gini coefficient is 6.5, 6, very, very high disparity. And it just creates instability. Now in China, I personally believe that the Gini coefficient is much higher than the official government number, because the number we're using is the government number. And right now, I think it's about 4.6. It may even be a little lower. I think it was 4.6 during 2022. It's a little bit lower now. Now, that's higher than Western Europe. It's higher than Japan, but, it's on par with the United States. So, but we don't really see instability. We don't see riots. We don't see, bread riots or something like that going on in China. So the question is, I don't know how high the number has to go for China to have instability. There's other problems that people just don't have disposable income, and Xi Jinping wants to shift the economy to a consumption economy, and that won't work if the people don't have money to spend.
All right, another question is, seeing all the problems that China's economy is facing, is the monthly income from around $300 right now, is that going down?
That's a good question. I would say my gut feeling is that it is going down, because a lot of these people were achieving even that level of income by working in a factory where they were getting overtime, and they were working weekends and 10-hour shifts and things like that. And that's going away now. That's steadily reducing. Factory output, factory employment, exports, those are all going down now. So I would have to believe that it is trending downward. I know that during COVID, the wealth disparity increased tremendously in China, and I think that probably was a function of people at the top have sources of income. For example, I don't know if that investments overseas or related to some service that they were able to provide during COVID, but then the people that were working in factories and construction, they couldn't work, so their income went down and the disparity increased. I think that moving forward, I think that's what we will see as well, is that as construction is winding down, infrastructure investment is winding down, foreign direct investment is winding down, I think we're probably going to see the disparity increase more, because it's probably disproportionately going to hurt the people at the bottom of the financial ladder.
And you're saying you don't really know where the limit is when people will start to rebel?
Yeah, I mean, the old wisdom is that people will rebel when they can't eat. When things get so bad that they don't have enough food, that's when they're going to rebel. In China, though, food is relatively cheap. So I just wrote an article about this, and I was saying, you can get a haircut in Shanghai for $5. In the countryside, I'm sure you can get one for $1 still, and you can still get a meal for a handful of coins. So there is food. I mean, these people are not starving. But in China, the public education system is inadequate, and the students have to pass and do well on the Gaokao in order to go to a good university. The only way that that happens is if the parents pay for supplemental education. So most families are spending about a third of their income on supplemental education for their children. So that's one of the first things that gets cut when the economy goes down. Now they can't put their kids in school. If you can't put your kids in school, or if they can't get into university, that's going to increase the income disparity in the next generation. And it's also going to add to the possibility that people would protest, that they would go on the street and say, it's not fair that my kid can't go to university. And, even if they have enough food to eat, they're always thinking about the future as well.
All right, let me follow up on an earlier point that you mentioned, and that's on how the state gets its income. So Beijing is trying to compete with the United States in terms of military, and that takes money, right? So is China getting its money the way that you mentioned before when it comes to military expansion?
Yes, it is, and actually that's why I'm so much in favor of trade restrictions on China and investment restrictions on China, because every dollar that we give to China, whether it's through buying their products or allowing them access to our capital markets, every dollar is being funneled back into military development and achieving China's 2049 goal, 2037 goal of surpassing the United States militarily. And that costs a lot of money, and Beijing needs money to do that. Beijing, unlike, say, a Western democracy in Europe or something, would probably be willing to allow the standard of living of the people to suffer in order to continue to fund the military. So in other words, if the economy continues in a downward trend, at some point, Xi will have to make a choice between whatever it is, school lunches and more bullets, and there's a good chance that Xi will choose more bullets.
Does that mean she would rather have a more military-focused economy rather than for the people?
I think absolutely so. And also they have very high youth unemployment right now. And if they could discourage young people from going to college, there would be a greater probability that those kids would be willing to take low-level jobs, and then there would be lower youth unemployment. So right now there are some jobs available, but the kids don't want them, and I don't blame them, because they pay $300 a month, and they went to college and they want to have good jobs in the city or something. So if you could discourage kids from going to college, well, then you're going to have fewer graduates. You're not going to have so much problem finding a placement for them. You're going to have more workers available for the factories, and you'll have more volunteers for the military. And I could easily see Xi shifting his priorities, which he has been. He's been shifting them towards power and towards achieving his policy goals, his 2049 goals of surpassing the United States, rather than really improving the quality of life for the people.
All right, maybe one more question. Do you think the state of the Chinese economy will improve in the coming months into next year, the year after? Because the U.S. Federal Reserve has hinted that they're going to cut interest rates, and that could lead to an easier financial environment in the United States, and that could have an impact on China as well. So do you think China's situation is going to improve?
That can be the case. If the U.S. were to cut interest rates, it might encourage some investment to return to China. It may cause some capital to flow back into China. So there could be some alleviation of the current trend, but I do believe that the current trend is the permanent trend, which is a general slowing of the Chinese economy moving forward and eventually normalizing at whatever the number is going to be, 3.5% growth or something like that. But yeah, so you always have these situations, like you had Christmas orders. Christmas orders helped a little bit. You have the Singles Day purchases. All these things help a little bit. U.S. cutting interest rates, it's going to help a little bit. But I mean, the U.S. is not going to cut interest rates back to 1%. Right, they're going to reduce them from where they are now. So I think it'll give a little bit of relief to Beijing, but there's so many other problems that will remain and persist.
So that's including the housing market, unemployment. So are you saying there's a bottom to the Chinese economy? You're saying around 3%.
Well, yeah, I'm just picking that number because the U.S. is a mature economy, but we tend to grow at about 2%. China is not yet a mature economy, so I think that it's going to normalize somewhere around 3%. And also, if we look at countries like Vietnam and some of the others that had very rapid growth, just like China did, and then then the economy started. Malaysia would be a good example too. Then the economy begins to level off, and it will still grow probably faster than the United States in terms of percentage points, but maybe not in dollars. So yeah, I'm not actually predicting a bottom. I'm just saying that is what will happen. China will reach a bottom, whatever that bottom is going to be. But I do believe that bottom will be higher than what ours is.
Is negative growth likely in your view?
That's a good question. I think that short-term, medium-term, anything is possible. I don't know that long-term negative growth is really possible. But yeah, I mean, we have these persistent problems, these embedded problems that are not being addressed. The youth unemployment being one of them. You said the real estate situation. You have tons and tons of unoccupied, unsold, overpriced real estate. What are you going to do with that? The prices are going to have to come down tremendously for people to be able to afford them. You can't have, it's unsustainable to have a market where the average apartment is 90 times the average salary. And the irony of that number of 90 is that in China, you can't actually own the property anyway. You just have a 70-year lease. So theoretically, the property, if you put your whole salary towards the mortgage every year, when you died, there would still be 20 years left on the note. It still wouldn't be paid off. So obviously, these are unsustainable, economic conditions that need to be resolved. And until China resolves them, any guess on what GDP growth, is going to be really is just a guess.
Well, all right. Thank you so much for your insight today, Antonio.
Thank you, Donwa.
Humanoid robots like NASA-developed Valkyrie are poised to play a greater role on Earth and beyond in the coming years. Engineers believe with the right software, humanoid robots can function similarly to humans by using the same tools, equipment, and methods of maneuvering itself. Here's the story.
Meet Valkyrie, NASA's humanoid robot. Standing over 6 feet tall and weighing 300 pounds, she cuts an imposing figure. She is designed to operate in challenging environments, such as areas hit by natural disasters, but she could also one day operate in space.
So we're not trying to replace human crews, we're really just trying to take the dull, dirty, and dangerous work off their plates.
Sean Azimi is the dexterous robotics team leader at NASA. He said humanoid robots which resemble humans could potentially handle risky tasks in space, so astronauts can prioritize exploration and discovery. With the right software, he says a humanoid robot could use the same tools and equipment as humans. For instance, robots could be tasked with cleaning solar panels or inspecting malfunctioning equipment outside the spacecraft.
In particular, with a humanoid robot, it's very intuitive to be able to directly drive the arms and move the head, and that's what we're going to see with Valkyrie today. But when we're thinking ahead to operations from Earth, we will be operating with a much higher degree of autonomy, where the human operator on Earth will be more strategically giving the robot tasks, and the robot would be responsible for completing those tasks autonomously.
Back on Earth, NASA has partnered with robotic company Apptronik, which is based in Texas. It wants to learn how Apptronik's earthly robots could benefit future robots destined for space.
They want to see a viable system on Earth before we take these systems into space, into Mars, onto the moon.
Nick Payne is the Chief Technology Officer of the firm, which has been developing Apollo, a humanoid robot whose earthly task will include working in warehouses and manufacturing plants. It is being developed to move packages and stack pallets. The company plans to start providing the humanoid robots to companies in early 2025. Payne says Apollo possesses clear advantages over its human counterparts, particularly endurance.
We're targeting having this system online 22 hours a day, And so there's multiple ways to do that. You can have a kind of trickle charge if you want to have a tether on the robot. Alternatively, this does have a swappable battery, so you can work for 4 hours, swap the battery, and then keep going in a very quick duration. So we're looking at kind of keeping the system online for the most amount of time that we can.
Robots like Apollo are designed with modularity in mind to be able to adapt to many applications, and that's where NASA's really trying to get that insight to see what are the key gaps where we would need to invest in the future to bring a terrestrial system into the space environment and certified for operating in space.